if we can still keep that kind of fondness for school or engagement within school and the desire to learn, that's going to be important coming out of this pandemic. I think that's going to be a lot more important than the grades that we have. And our teens too, knowing like who came up and supported them at the end of this is going to be a big takeaway. I don't think anyone's going to look back 15 years from now and be like, well, I failed that math test. But they are going to see that parent that showed up, right, and said like, I care about you. Is there anything I can help you with? Can I sit alongside you while you're working? Those are the memories that we're going to take away.
That is Katelyn Bolte, and this is the Well Mind Podcast. How are you today? I hope that you are doing well and making the most of your day. Thanks for spending some of your time with me. I'm your host, Dr. Ben Coles. The Well Mind Podcast is a space for meaningful conversations about a broad range of wellness topics. Today, I asked Katelyn Bolte to join me in the studio for a conversation about adolescent mental health and parenting teens. Katelyn is a mental health counselor and the director of a day treatment program for adolescents. I'll let Katelyn tell you about herself and about what day treatment is and how she came to do this work. What I will say is that Katelyn was a wonderful guest. We cover a lot of ground in this episode. We talk schooling during the pandemic and this transition back into school, the struggles that social isolation has amplified for our youth, emotional development during our teen years, and there's plenty of parenting-focused talk throughout our conversation. This is a must-listen for anyone with teens at home now or in the near future. Katelyn understands the real challenges that teens and their families are facing, and she shares a wealth of practical wisdom that I hope you can integrate into the flow of your family life. More than anything, Katelyn and I drive home the need for parents to cultivate connections with their teens during these critical years of life. So, here is my conversation with Katelyn Bolte in episode 18, Building Connections. Hi, Katelyn. Thank you so much for coming on the Well Mind Podcast. It's great to have you as a guest for our show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to our conversation for the last couple of weeks since we set it up, and we're going to go into some new territory because as I've talked with a variety of different people about a whole range of wellness topics, one of the things that we haven't done yet is talking about teens, and you being an expert, I'm going to use that word.
All right.
I know you don't like that, but I'm going to use that expert in this age demographic, and you can explain a little bit about your background and the work that you do and those kind of things. I think you have a wealth of knowledge and experience to be able to share with folks. And there's a lot of parents of teens out there that are just trying to do the best that they can for their teenager and support them and provide for them and help them develop and grow into that independent adult that we all want them to be.
Right.
But there's a lot of challenges that teens face in our world. So I think we'll dive into all of that as we talk today. But before we go too far, I want to give you a little chance to introduce yourself to the Well Mind audience. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're at,
Sure.
and then some of the highlights of your background, things that you think are noteworthy.
Yes, sounds good. Well, again, thanks for having me. I am excited to be talking about teens today. I talk with a lot of teens for my job. So I'm a program therapist and actually the manager of the day treatment program at Christian Family Solutions. And we work with teenagers who have some pretty significant mental health concerns every day. So I can talk a little bit more about day treatment and what that looks like in a bit.
Absolutely.
But as far as kind of my own background and professional experience, so I completed my degree in psychology at Bethany Lutheran College and then went on and got my master's at St. Thomas University. And at that time, I knew I wanted to be a counselor, and I wasn't really sure who I wanted to work with, but I liked the conceptualization of clients and figuring out like what makes this client tick or operate the way that they're operating right now. And so during my time at Bethany, I had met Dr. Mears, who works at Christian Family Solutions, and then in my graduate program, ended up doing some evaluations with him, and he specializes in working with teenagers as well. So during that work, we did psychological evaluations for teens who have experienced some pretty significant trauma, and did personality inventories, and just really worked on kind of understanding and documenting for parents and other support providers for these teenagers, kind of what's going on with this teen and how has this experience and this experience and this experience equated to what this teenager is presenting as today. So that was kind of my first experience in working with teenagers was during my grad program, and I really just gravitated towards that population since then.
Yeah.
Graduated with my master's and began working at Christian Family Solutions and just slowly started building a caseload of teenagers. And then about a year ago, we launched a D treatment program for teens too, which is just a little higher dosage of care for teenagers who are struggling with anxiety or depression or have experienced trauma, and just need a little bit more counseling than maybe that weekly check in with a counselor. So that's kind of what I do day to day.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, kind of traditional psychotherapy or counseling services are typically provided in a one-on-one setting,
Right.
Either through in-person or through telehealth means. There's a lot of flexibility in that. And then you're right. Yeah. Typically once a week is the, I guess, dosage for that.
Right.
So day treatment, you said, is a higher level of care.
Right.
It's a little bit more intensive.
Right.
So can you talk just maybe a little bit about that part? What kind of goes into day treatment? Because this is your bread and butter. I mean, this is what you're doing every day to provide services for teens and their families.
Yeah. So a day treatment, it's 12 to 15 hours a week of group therapy and then individual or family therapy to a client. And so during our group therapies, we work on different skills with a bunch of other teenagers in the room. We usually have, with COVID, it's a little bit less, but I would say 7 is an ideal group size for me.
Yeah.
And the teenagers get to have a trained professional in the room, and we walk through like different ways that we can cope in difficult situations, or how can I, practice my social skills and like saying hello to people when I'm experiencing anxiety. So we get to do some of that work within groups, but then also providing, education regarding depression and anxiety and what that might look like, different struggles that teens are having, and how they can cope with that. And the really cool thing about groups and what gravitated me towards working with groups was that teens, and maybe parents of teens know this, or those of you who have been a teen know that like teens don't necessarily like talking to adults all the time. And so when we have teens working with other teens and they're able to provide insights or help with problem solving, sometimes that can be, oftentimes it's more powerful than that voice coming from an adult, whether that's a family member or even a trained therapist, giving that support to a teenager. So it's really powerful to work in a group setting and to have teens walking along their mental health journeys with other teens. So that's a cool thing about the day treatment setting as well, is that they get to do that in those groups.
Absolutely. What a special opportunity for kids to be able to connect with one another, because I think that in general, talking about mental health is not something that is done often in person.
Yeah.
And I definitely see a lot of online discussions about mental health, or people posting about mental health, and kind of like putting things out there into the world. But that's not really what this is about. I mean, this is a much more close setting.
Yeah.
And I imagine it feels riskier because here's this person sitting across from me, whereas maybe if I'm putting this on, Facebook or Instagram,
Right.
Snapchat probably is
Yes.
more likely.
Let's be real.
Yeah, Snapchat. that actually might feel less risky.
Right.
But in my mind, I think the reverse is actually true.
Mm-hmm.
Like putting things out on social media that are very personal to me is very risky. Whereas when I'm in a safe environment with being, having guidance from a trained professional
Right.
and other people that also understand, hey, we're here for some of the same reasons.
Right.
Like that actually is way less risky.
Yeah.
So I don't know, what's been your experience in just that transition for adolescents coming into
Yes.
a day treatment program and being like, whoa, this is like totally different than anything I've ever experienced.
Yeah. I'm smiling here because I'm thinking about most of our teens who first start programming, they don't want to be in our group setting. And then when they graduate, a lot of times they're nervous about when they graduate, when they finish programming, they're nervous about what does life look like now that I am no longer going to have this day-to-day group support. So I would say maybe 1 in 10 teens who walk into our group therapy setting are like, yeah, let's do this. Let's talk and learn about mental health and process things and support one another. And it really is a neat process to watch them open up and to practice vulnerability and to learn that it's okay to trust people in person. Am I answering your question?
Yeah.
I got sidetracked because it was...
No, but...
Yeah.
And the audience knows this. I've said this before. I don't like asking why questions, but this kind of begs the like why is there this big block for adolescents coming in that they're like, this is supposed to be helpful, and so much education is being provided about like attend to your mental health, like do good, like take care of yourself, do good things for yourself, and engaging in counseling is one of those things. So in your mind, why do you think there's just this huge barrier? Right.
I think because we don't do that on a day-to-day basis in our society and in our culture. We don't talk about mental health, at least in person. And you were kind of hinting at this before. And as a counselor, I get to have lots of conversations with people about their struggles and how they're coping with that. But when we're kind of caught up in the day-to-day of life, we're talking about school and whether I got my homework done and who won the Super Bowl and all the surface level content. And then I think when you add in social media and cell phones, I mean, a lot of we stay at the surface level frequently, and that's what teens know. It's the communities that they're immersed in. And so actually opening up and talking about things with a real person can be really scary. And then something that I always think about with teens too is just what has their home environment looked like too. And I think in recent years we have become more comfortable with talking about mental health and our struggles and practicing mindfulness and being present. And at the same time, I can speak to this as a counselor too. Sometimes I struggle with that in my own day-to-day living. I'm not present, or I'm not practicing mindfulness or, identifying my emotions. And so when I'm not modeling that to my kids or in my home, then they're going to learn to not do that too.
So I would, part of this is just the culture that we live in.
Right.
I think we were talking before I hit record on just like, we can't avoid talking about the context that we're living in right now.
Right.
And there have been so many kids that are doing distance learning, at times exclusively, sometimes in a hybrid format. But there are a lot of barriers, like legitimate, real barriers right now to having these face-to-face personal conversations.
Yes.
So I have two questions, I guess, about that. But the first one is, how did you guys handle that when things were like locked down and you're still trying to provide services and care to these adolescents and their families? Like, I mean, was there just a period of time where you couldn't do that? Or what did that look like?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate at Christian Family Solutions that they had some really awesome telehealth services and supports kind of ready to go. We were doing that prior to needing to do that with the global pandemic. So that was awesome that we already knew how to use telehealth and have a secure network where we could have confidential groups occurring. Group therapy though over telehealth was something different, right?
Yeah.
So these teens, they need this higher dosage of care, and we were offering that in person, and then there was concerns about health and physical health, and if we're able to continue to meet their mental health needs while still, honoring the physical health concerns that are present in the world.
Sure.
And honestly, we've still had to cope with that, right, for this past year. So even though we're back in person offering in-person services now, there's times when people need to quarantine or they need to not come in person for some time, and then we're back to those telehealth groups. So long answer short, we did telehealth groups, and we had 6 or 7 teens join a Zoom room with a therapist, and we had to get really creative with the ways that we were engaging teens because believe it or not, the therapist talking about how you can, engage in healthy activities while you're trapped in your home is not as exciting as like the dog bouncing around in the background or something. So we had to get kind of creative with different ways to engage teens, but we were able to make that transition. And I think even though it wasn't ideal to be over Zoom instead of in person, it was really helpful that we were still able to continue to offer those group supports to those teens at the time.
Yeah, that flexibility, that ability to respond and adapt so quickly is incredibly impressive.
Yeah.
I think that's a shining example of what I hope would happen, but I know that wasn't the case in a lot of situations that services were interrupted or stopped. So definitely a blessing for those kids that were participating at that point, even though it wasn't ideal. That's kind of like the mantra, this isn't ideal, but we can still get something done here.
Right.
And it can be helpful. I've heard that over and over and over. So then my second part of the question is like, I think everybody is attuned to how the pandemic is impacting mental health, like across the board. I've been asked to talk about this quite a bit in different groups and presentations, large and small, but I'm kind of curious what your response would be from an adolescent perspective. You're kind of boots on the ground, working with kids every day. What kind of things are you seeing in terms of mental health impacts?
Yes. So the first big struggle that I think of that parents often come to me with is, there's 2. Okay, so one, no one's doing well at school right now, and there's a lot of anxiety from parents and teens about, I'm failing my classes, or my teen doesn't have the organizational skills to get things handed in, and now I'm the parent and the dean of students and the math teacher, and that's a lot. So I'm thinking about school as one thing, and kind of the anxiety of performance-related concerns as impacted by COVID. And then also the increased isolation that we've had too, when we were kind of hinting at that before. So I can start with talking a little bit about school, if that's okay. And
let's go there.
Performance related to that. So a lot of teens and a lot of kids right now are just struggling with distance learning and engaging in school. And I think sometimes too, parents can heighten that anxiety because they want their kids to do well too. And we're all living through difficult times right now. And you were just talking about this isn't ideal, and we can still have, positive things come out of this experience. And when it comes to school, what I'm really encouraging families and teens to focus on is engaging in school and still liking school to the best of their ability. So maybe we're not getting like A's in math class anymore, and we're getting more C's and D's, or we're only turning in half the assignments, but are we able to engage in math class, right? Or am I able to watch those YouTube videos where the guy walks through on the whiteboard, and I think it's Khan Academy, and they kind of show you all the cool different techniques for math and why we have those things. If we can still keep that kind of fondness for school or engagement within school, and the desire to learn, that's going to be important coming out of this pandemic. I think that's going to be a lot more important than the grades that we have. And our teens too, knowing like who came up and supported them at the end of this is going to be a big takeaway. I don't think anyone's going to look back 15 years from now and be like, well, I failed that math test. But they are going to see that parent that showed up, right, and said like, I care about you. Is there anything I can help you with? Can I sit alongside you while you're working? Those are the memories that we're going to take away.
I love that phrase that you use, fondness for learning. Like that's something I think that's so key here that we don't want to lose, because learning is a lifelong process.
Right.
And if at this point I start like internalizing messages of like, well, I suck at this, I'm not a good student, or I don't like learning, school is dumb or boring or whatever, like if I'm really internalizing those messages, then at some point the pandemic is going to be over, but kids are still going to be going back to school, and then what does that look like for them if they're kind of coming in with these negative internal storylines about school?
Right.
The other part you were kind of touching on was just like, I'll use the word like closeness or proximity for parents with their teens at this point. I think there's a potential for increased conflict around school. And that's probably more related to just high levels of stress. And being overly focused maybe on outcomes. I don't think we can get away from focusing on outcomes because it's school, and that's like
the system.
Yeah, that's the system that we have right now that we have to work with, and maybe that's a topic for a different day. but it is a reality. So how are you coaching parents to kind of moderate their level of intensity when they're approaching their kid about, hey, you haven't turned in an algebra assignment in the last 2 weeks, like what's up, like what are some of the phrases that you're using, or the coaching strategies that you're using?
And this is not even something that's related to COVID, but just kind of a guiding parenting principle. We cannot help our teens or our kids regulate if we are dysregulated. And so when I'm talking about regulation, I'm just talking about being able to cope with our emotions and feel like we're kind of grounded in a situation, and we're able to be present and to have control of what's going on, or of ourselves, not the entire situation, because we can't ever have control of an entire situation. So I take that strategy, though, and use that with parents then when we're talking about distance learning or addressing school and performance in school. And so if a parent themselves is feeling stressed about their teen's performance, or like, oh my goodness, is something wrong with my teenager, and their anxiety's up, when they go into that situation, that's going to automatically, your teen is going to be on the defense, because they're going to perceive that, something's off here. But if we can come into a situation like that regulated, and from I want to come alongside you and help you, and I'm here to support you, and I love you no matter what. When we come from that approach, that's going to have stronger effects, and we might actually, have a teen open up to us and tell us what is really going on, and not just like, I don't know, I turned them in, but they must not have actually went in. I've heard that one before, So anyways, that's when we go into a situation regulated, able to cope with our own emotions, whether that's, parent taking a 5-10 minute break between reading the things on the portal and going to their teen to talk about it, or maybe a day break. I mean, I don't know.
I don't know.
5-10 minutes was gracious.
Yeah, 5 or 10 minutes, boy. If the parents out there have got that down, please send me an email and let me know how you're doing that.
You can be the next podcast guest.
Yes, exactly. No, because I think it does take time, because we need processing time as parents when we get that information and we see, like things aren't going well, or this thing hasn't happened, or there's another failing grade or something. And honestly, I think you're right. This is even outside of COVID. I think maybe parents are compelled to be more involved because of COVID, which could be a good thing. But the reality is that any parent, when they see their kid not doing well in school, I think is going to have a reaction to that. And we can't come at the teen with the reaction. We need to kind of sort through some of that for ourselves. Whether that's doing some grounding for ourselves, kind of stepping back and taking perspective, like what's really important here. Is this the grade, or is the relationship more important? And I pray that the relationship always takes the priority as the precedence. Because if we lose that, then the grades don't really matter then, do they?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So respond, not react. Give yourself some time. Maybe it's a day.
Yes.
Maybe, and if it is something more urgent, just be intentional with regulating before you walk into that situation. What if things escalate while you're having the conversation, either on the parent or the teen or both?
Right. Well, if it's the parent that things are escalating, you can feel that internally, like I'm getting angry or I'm feeling more anxious or this is disappointing. Take a break and model that for your teen, right? Like, okay, I'm feeling frustrated right now. I'm going to step outside for a minute and, compose myself, and then let's continue this conversation in a little while. I know sometimes that's vulnerable for parents to do, to be able to express their emotions to their teens, and it's uncomfortable for a lot of people because it is vulnerable. And at the same time, that's really what we're asking our teens to do with us, right? So if we can show them how to do that, A+. That's funny as we're talking about schools, school grades.
Now you're grading
yes,
parents.
I'm grading.
Yeah.
Not grading your parenting style. But anyways, if we're able to model that for our teens, I mean, there's not much better than that.
Right.
And then if your teen becomes upset too, you can say, let's come back to this at a different time. I can see that you're feeling upset right now, or it looks like maybe this is uncomfortable. Can we come back and talk about this after dinner or tomorrow morning, or at a time maybe when you're feeling like would be better for you? What would be a better time for you? What could be a better time for you? So
yeah. But asking those questions, because I think sometimes there's a sense of urgency with like, oh, we've got to deal with this now. We've got to figure out a solution, and there's maybe too much pressure to just get right to the answer.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when kids aren't talking, it's the parent or the adult that's providing the solution, and that may not that may not actually be a good fit. So I don't know. I always encourage people to approach things from a collaborative standpoint.
Yes.
Like, here are my concerns. What are your concerns? And then can we work on it? Even creating a list of like 3 or 4 different options, and then we can just try them out.
Yeah.
We don't have to say, oh, this is it. You're going to do it this way, and it has to be this way. Because I think that kind of starts to fall into more coercive tactics, and that, again, hurts the relationship.
Right. And what a great bridge as we think about our teens transitioning into adulthood, right? Parents are not always going to be there to provide their teens with, these are the 3 solutions that you can try, or the 3 things that you can try to get the solution that you need. We really do need to walk alongside our teens and watch them experience things that they're going to fail at, and be right alongside them as they do that, and provide new strategies. That's what being a teen and parenting a teen is about, prepping them for adulthood. So that's a great
having an eye to the future. Exactly. Always, not getting too bogged down in the immediate moment. So other insights or kind of reflections that you have on this whole school process?
I was talking a little bit about isolation too.
That's the other one that I have down here for us, because you obviously those go hand in hand at this point, because so much of social interaction takes place at school.
Right.
And when that's taken away, and then some of the gathering places are also limited or closed.
Right.
That's another barrier, another obstacle. So talk a little bit about the issue of increased isolation during the pandemic, and how that's impacting mental health.
Yes. So our teens have more opportunities to isolate. We all know that, right? And I think a thing too that a lot of parents have concerns about right now is like, my teen is spending so much time in their room alone, and what are they doing in there? Is this normal? What is normal right now? Get that question a lot. Is this normal? And so when I think about isolation, I think the first thing is perspective taking. Like, when we are not in school, let's say we're not in school for 7-8 hours per day, we can't expect that our teen is going to spend those 7 or 8 hours that they typically are spending walking around school and interacting with other people, with our families and in the living room, right? So there is going to be just naturally increased times that teens are going to be alone or need breaks comes. They're going through this transition just like we are. But then when I think about isolation too and kind of loss of structure that teens have had in their life, and this increased communication online.
So as parents are thinking about how to gauge what's normal in a very abnormal situation,
Right.
they're expressing concerns about how much time my teen is spending on their own versus how much time they're spending with my family.
Right.
Is this, what's a good balance?
Right.
Because forced family time, I don't
fun.
I don't see that going over
Sure.
super well either. But there still needs to be some like touch points
Right.
throughout the day and evening,
Right.
where you are having that communication with your teen. They're not just in their room. So what are some of the useful ways that parents can kind of structure that at home so that they are having those touch points?
Yeah. I think if you have the luxury of having space in your house where we can transition from being out of bedrooms to having space where you can be alone elsewhere, that's amazing. And definitely if you have those options in your home, take advantage of them. So if you can have a school area that's not in the classroom, love it, make it happen. I know not every family has access to do that or ability to do that, depending on who's all in the home at a time. But if we can have that time where we're leaving our bedrooms and there's potential for connection opportunities in the hallway or in the kitchen, those are important things too. I had a teen the other day who was struggling with isolating, and she was like, I think I'm just gonna try to drink more water because then I'll have to get up and use the bathroom and have to fill up my water again. And I was like, that's amazing. What a great opportunity, because you go to the kitchen and somebody's in the kitchen, and then you're in the hallway and you see your cat and you pet your cat for a little bit. So we can kind of get creative with those things too if we have those options. So drink water, use other rooms besides your bedroom if possible. But then too, still kind of having those, like you were talking about, structure within the day. So we're having breakfast approximately at this time, or if the family's all home, we're doing family lunch, right, at noon, if that's possible. And then family dinners, I'm a big proponent for sitting around a table in the evening and sharing a meal together and being able to talk about your day. That's really important. So we can still have some of those things even when things are abnormal or situations change. Those can be consistent points that remain or that we add in at this time and hopefully stick around after things return to normal, whatever normal will be.
Yeah. Well, and I would say that in a number of cases, things are opening up more. And kids have been in school. Kids are participating in activities, and so it's not. I mean, I know there are some communities where school has still been, very limited or only distance learning, or, you're going 2 days a week or something like that. And that's just incredibly difficult to manage when you're kind of either, it's one thing if you're always at home or if you're always at school, but this back and forth, I think is extremely challenging for families to just have that level of flexibility. People are working, people have other commitments. It puts an incredible strain on the family system. So, but the reality is a lot of places are opening back up. A lot of kids are back in school. I don't know. Are you seeing some kind of benefits to some normalcy returning? I mean, are kids experiencing kids are resilient. That's true.
We know that.
We know that. They actually probably adapt a lot better than some of us adults because they're used to change. Everything's always changing for them. So, but what kind of benefits are you noticing now that maybe things are opening up, loosening? People are back in school. As
a counselor, I really struggled when things were shut down, because so often the teens that I work with, either because they have symptoms of depression and they're isolating, or because they have symptoms of anxiety and they're worried about how society will perceive them, they aren't getting those social connections. And so they were, like when the world shut down, they were like, woohoo, I get to stay in my bedroom all day or like at my house.
Yeah.
And so having those opportunities that we can even talk about, is this a possibility that you can go to youth group, or that you could, maybe go to the mall with a friend for an hour on the weekend or something like that. We can talk about those things and see what might be a good fit. We just had such limited options when things were all over Zoom. And honestly, like Zoom can be kind of awkward for that first meeting. So, being like, oh, I'll go to my virtual youth group with these 7 people and I've never been before, that was extremely anxiety provoking. So while there is some, I think, increased anxiety that I have seen too, as we transition back into uncomfortable situations, like being exposed to other people, and not from like a health perspective, but from I'm afraid how people are going to perceive me perspective.
Yeah, the interpersonal aspects of it.
There's so many benefits to being able to interact with people face to face, like we were talking about before, and having those authentic connections.
But it's again, it's a transition, and so now it's like trying to figure out, well, how do I do this again? Right. So things are always changing.
Yes.
And so flexibility is an imperative at this point. But
Right.
It's just looking for opportunities when they present themselves, or creating some
Absolutely.
opportunities. I had a guest on that was, he talked about what can we say yes to during this time, because so much of what our conversation is focused on no. And I just love that. And I've used that over and over again in my own life and in my conversations with people, is like, let's try and get to a yes with something.
Right.
So how do parents, if they have a reluctant teen, they're maybe unsure about getting together with other people, not because of health concerns, but just because I haven't done this in a while, and I don't feel confident, hanging out at the mall, or what are some things that parents can do to just support their kids when they're feeling that reluctance or that hesitancy to re-engage?
So for sure, before we were talking about different questions that you can ask your kids, and as counselors, we always preach like open-ended questions. So what could be, instead of like, would you like to go to the mall? That's a yes or no. You could say like, who might you like to go to the mall with? Or who might you feel comfortable spending a couple hours with? I know you've really used to like watching movies with your friends on Friday nights. Who might you like to watch a movie with in the coming weeks, or something like that? Or what movie might you want to see in the coming weeks? Oh, I know your friend so-and-so really likes that kind of movie. Maybe we can all go together. So offering some of those kind of coaching, problem-solving strategies with connecting can be helpful. And then parents, I think this is probably more helpful for younger teens, like that 13, 14-year-old age. But you can have some kind of coordination too. Like, hey, I know that our neighbor needs some help shoveling the snow, right? And you know that neighbor is out shoveling the snow. Can you go out and help them, right? So they're still going to get that social connection point with another person. Or this was with an even younger kiddo, but I had one of my teens, or one of my kids, he had a dog, and he got together like for a doggy play date with the neighbor next door for their dogs. And it was like the dogs playing together, but it was really like the kids interacting as their dogs played together because they were lonely. So that's for even younger kids. But I'm thinking kind of that mentality of like, how can we help coordinate some of those social situations? And I think when we get to, 16, 17, 18, there's probably going to be a little bit more resistance to that. But for younger teens who can't drive yet and do even need parent coordination to help with some of that, parents can help.
Yeah, a certain level of structuring and coordination is necessary. And even, you're right, as they kind of 15, 16, it's really like driving age, then it seems like, okay, there's a little bit more freedom here, and it's more just about encouraging that they do that, right? And giving them opportunities to do that. And supporting them when they express a desire to want to do something.
Right.
I've definitely seen that in my own household with my teenage boys, my 2 oldest. They, they want to get together with somebody, and they kind of make all their plans, but then, they're not always great about like, hey, mom and dad, is this okay if, or does this work for us? But we really, we want them to do that. So we really just try and support them as much as possible. And even if it's not super convenient, it's still like, yep, we want to just kind of go that extra mile to make sure that this happens. And just, again, trying to say yes to those things and support them, because I think then momentum builds and it's like, oh yeah, this is how it's supposed to be. And I get more comfortable and, and then it's like, this is where I want to be. I want to be with my friends. I want to be more active and engaged in life.
And I think when teens know that their parents want that or they're open to that too, that's really helpful. So even saying like, would you like to spend some time with your friends, or do you think we could invite so-and-so over? Our teens do this thing where they want to protect their parents. I don't know if little kids do this, but a lot of teenagers will they'll not share like what's really going on with them with their parents. And part of that is, this is uncomfortable, I'm sharing my emotions with my parents, but part of it's like, I can tell my mom's stressed right now, and so I'm not going to talk to her about my tough day. Or I know that, work has been really intense for dad, and so he's really busy and he probably doesn't want to drive me to my friend's house. And so our teens knowing that we're going to show up next to them, or we would be open to them going to a friend's house, even though there's still some health concerns in our community. That's going to be okay. I might say yes to that, right? That might increase that comfort of them engaging too.
Yeah, trying to make it work. And maybe it's not exactly how they thought it was going to be, but still working with them, walking with them. That's kind of the theme here, is just coming alongside them to support them and saying yes, or getting things done, or attending to what their needs are.
Right.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So outside of, just school and some of these isolation issues, just I want to broaden it a little bit and just talk about how, from a developmental standpoint, teens are going through some really critical years right now. A lot of identity development, a ton of physical changes, learning all about social relationships and dating and these kind of things. Like, there's so many developmental tasks at this stage. I'm wondering, what do you see as, I guess, some of the major ones that, okay, this is something as a parent I've got to attend to. I've got to make sure I'm giving time to this kind of developmental task or need for my teenager.
Right. So teens are tough sometimes because they have all these emotions, right? And their brains are not fully developed, so they don't know how to work through those emotions, right? Or be able to control those impulses. So I think that's kind of the first thing that parents have to remember when we're thinking about the development of our teenagers and where they're at, is that they are experiencing the full range of emotions that adults can, but they don't have that fully developed prefrontal cortex that allows them to kind of navigate those emotions and to be able to say, I need to take a break right now and recollect myself. And so again, I'm going to talk about parents coming alongside their teenagers and modeling those skills for them, or helping them problem solve and asking those questions like we've been talking about for a while. And so I think that's really one of the biggest things that we're looking for parents to do, is come alongside their parents or alongside their teens and walk with them through this journey of teenagehood until they become adults, right? And our goal is not that when our kids are 18 that they still have a million restrictions on their cell phone and they can only go someplace when, our goal when our teens turn 17, 18 years old is that they're able to make some more of those adult decisions. And we as parents can feel confident in their ability to make those decisions. And we get to help kind of guide and influence that in those teenage years, 13, 14, 15, 16, as they are developing those skills of decision making. So I see that as kind of one of the bigger things, the tasks that teens are doing, is just developing how to cope with their emotions and the range of emotions that they're feeling, and then transitioning into an adult and feeling confident in the decisions that they're making.
Yeah. And those obviously go hand in hand too, because when I feel something, that usually triggers some sort of a behavior or action on my part, right? So then my decision making is more likely to be driven by my current state, my emotional state at that point,
Right.
than it is anything else, any other, nugget of wisdom that my parent has given me or some core value that I have.
Right.
But it really is like, I'm feeling this right now, and this is kind of directing the path that I'm going.
Right. Right.
So that can lead to what looks like impulsiveness,
Yep.
right? Or risk taking, or even just, boy, that really doesn't seem to match up with the situation. Like your reaction is like
Right.
way disproportionate to this.
Yeah.
And so, and it can go both ways. I have seen it both ways where it's like,
Right.
this is kind of a big deal, but there's like nothing really happening. Like,
Right.
no, the reaction is way too little. Like, nope,
Right.
this is a big deal.
Right.
And then other times it's like, oh, this is a small thing, but yeah,
Got
that
the big
reaction is,
reaction.
yeah, kind of over the top.
Yeah.
So just recognizing that those
Yeah.
are like some of the big developmental tasks right now.
Right.
And modeling, like you said,
Yeah.
coaching, having some input, but then ultimately stepping back too. I mean, this is kind of a process of stepping back in terms of level of control.
Right.
So you were talking about like restrictions on a cell phone. Like
Right. Yeah.
that's going to look very different for somebody who's 12 or 13
Right.
versus somebody who's 17 or 18.
Yep.
Right. And we can't give the 13-year-old, 17-year-old permissions,
Right.
and we can't hold the 17-year-old hostage to 13-year-old permissions
Right.
either. But
Right.
that's so tricky to navigate for parents, isn't it?
It is. It is. And it changes, and it's different for every kid.
Yeah.
And it's different for every situation that's going on. And for, honestly, like every app that's created, you're like, whoa, what is this one now? What can we do on here? So there does have to be different boundaries. And I think if we're talking about screen time for a minute too, one of the best things that we can do as parents is showing up alongside our kids on screen time. And that doesn't necessarily mean like, okay, I'm going to friend you on Facebook and on Snapchat and on Instagram. But it can look like we're going to engage in screen time at the same time in the same area. So TikTok came out this past year, and I don't know if
Right.
your kids are on TikTok or not, but a lot of the teens I work with are on TikTok. And some of the stuff on TikTok is hilarious.
Yeah.
And so my teens will be like, hey, look at this. Like, this is this cool thing that I saw. And then we get to have that bonding moment over TikTok. And then we might see this video that pops up that we're like, oh, that's maybe not the most appropriate video. And we get to have a conversation about it because we're looking at that media together. So that can kind of be a fun connection thing for parents to do with teens too, I think, is just being open to learning about what they're doing online and engaging online and, looking at those funny memes with them and sharing laughter and connection in that way. Those moments are really good.
Yeah. And that's the best use, right? Is where we're just taking some intentional time.
Yeah.
We're trying to be purposeful. We're doing it together.
Right.
And it's just a connection point. The downside to that is then that becomes the focus, right, of
Right.
all of my attention, and that's all I'm doing. My kids are kind of sick of me saying this, but I heard it. I was listening to another podcast, and I was like, oh, that is so true. The guest on the podcast said scrolling is the new smoking.
Oh, yeah.
And what stood out to them is like somebody got up and they went outside so that they could smoke.
Yeah.
And while they were smoking, they were just scrolling on their phone. And so they made this observation, like scrolling really is the new smoking. It's just like when you don't know what else to do,
You scroll.
You scroll.
Yeah.
Right? And so I will, bring that to my teens' attention. And they know I'm doing it lovingly. Like I'm not like being all hardcore about it, but it's just trying to bring their attention. Like that maybe isn't something that you need to do right now. Like we could be doing something else.
Right.
So I don't know. Are there other kind of ways that maybe parents are using humor or using just some other methods to kind of help their teens reflect on or like think about their digital use, their online use?
Yeah.
YouTube is another big one.
I was just going to say,
you know,
YouTube.
that like hours and hours and hours can be lost.
I know.
Watching YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's just, oh, if you like this, then
Right.
how about this? And if you like that, then how about this? And it's
Right.
just constantly being suggested. And the whole purpose is to just keep you there.
Yeah.
Right.
And our teens are most vulnerable to that when we think, again, about kind of developmentally what teens are doing. So teenagers are preparing for adulthood, and what happens in adulthood is we kind of think about like the decisions and where we're going to go in life and what we're going to do in life. And so we're constantly seeking out new situations as teens, which is, we're like, yes, as parents, this is really great when we're thinking about, oh, I'll try youth group, or I'll try out for the basketball team, or I'm going to join art club, or whatever it is. Those new experiences, those are all positive things too. But then when you think about like YouTube and Instagram and those scrolling and they're generating the content, or Netflix, which is like, are you still watching? Right.
Yeah.
And you're like, yes, I am. When we have those platforms that are really, I mean, they're made to suck teens in, and it's constantly giving them that new stimuli, which their brains are like, yes, this is what I want. I want to identify new things, but it's not in the real world, which is, it's concerning, because we need to have those experiences in the real world so we can think about what comes next and what we like, and identify some of those things that will make us who we are. So
I have not watched it, but I want to, and I want to watch it with my boys.
Yeah.
The Social Dilemma, I think that's what it's called, right? The Netflix. Have you seen it?
I've not seen it,
You
but I've
haven't?
heard
Okay.
really good and creepy things
Yeah.
about it. So, but I think it would. I've actually had some families that I work with that have talked about watching it with their teens. So,
Okay. Yeah.
would recommend.
Yeah, that's another kind of just another thing that I'm gonna do to just again stimulate conversation about our digital access and how we need to be intentional with how we use that, and really understand, unfortunately, some of the more insidious sides of it. You know, it was, again, recently brought to my attention, you know, how much does Google know about you? You know, and you can actually look at that now on Google. You can kind of look and see how they've profiled you in terms of your interest for populating ads and suggestions on content and media. So all, you know, again, I think coming at it not from like do this because I'm telling you to,
Right.
but like let's engage in something together, and then we can have a conversation about it.
Right.
Because then it's less of, well, I think this and you think this,
Right.
but like, oh, well, what are your thoughts about that? Or what is your perception of that? And this is kind of what I was reacting to.
Right.
And it's, I think, disarms some of what can feel, again, adversarial or controlling, but really just trying to provide education and like awareness. So, yeah, that's another thing that I'm planning on doing.
Love
and
that. Yeah.
Definitely after I've done that, maybe I'll talk about it in another podcast, what the outcome
Stay
of
tuned.
that was. Yeah, to be continued. So, so you were talking a little bit about some connection strategies there. Really like, oh, like let's go on TikTok together and like watch some funny videos.
Right.
I've watched YouTube with my kids.
Yeah.
And you're right. Some of it is super funny.
Yep.
And then some of it is like, oh goodness, please let's skip. Like, can we move forward from this? Like, this is not appropriate.
Yeah.
And so that can feel a little like, oh, this is kind of risky. Like, because then if they're just watching that on their own. So outside of those media methods, what are some other ways that you're encouraging kind of some of those connection strategies for parents and their teens?
Yes, I've referenced before, but big fan of meal times. Those are, I mean, everybody has to eat, or we all should be eating. So when you can eat together, that is ideal.
What makes that so valuable in your mind?
Yeah, it's just a touch point for a family or people to connect. And I think food, when we have something else that's in front of us that's bringing us together, it doesn't have to be as awkward as just like sitting at a table with someone and how was your day? But when we have something that we're kind of doing together as an activity that can make it feel more natural, I guess.
Yep.
So like I was saying, like we have to eat. So why don't we eat together? That can be something, I think too, just like inviting your teens to tag along on errands that you're doing, and they probably hate this, but maybe they'll love it if you stop at Starbucks on the way or something. But just going for, like a little coffee run, or hey, I'm running to the grocery store and then I was thinking about swinging through the McDonald's drive-through for an ice cream cone on the way home. 99 cents, I think.
Yeah.
Let's do it. So those opportunities that you can have, I think driving is a great one too. And that's why I'm talking about errands here, because again, we're in the same place at the same time. But our activity has a purpose that's not connecting, but really we are still having that opportunity to connect with them. So that can be really helpful, I think, to those opportunities, and just continuing to provide times when you're showing up alongside your teen and doing similar activities. If your teen is cleaning their room, they have to clean their room, right? You don't have to clean their room with them every time, but could you show up alongside them and help them clean their room sometime if they're open to it? I think that could be a really great opportunity to have some natural conversation with your teen, or other household tasks too. So.
Folding laundry.
I was thinking about the sock drawer at my house of all the spare socks.
Yeah.
Tackling that guy.
No, well, yeah. I mean, it'll be folding laundry. Maybe, we're listening to music, or maybe a show is on, maybe it's not. But I mean, the laundry's got to get folded. So if there are 3 or 4 of us all sitting around, let's just do it together then.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So even kind of those, benign kinds of activities. It doesn't have to be something spectacular every time. In fact, that's more the exception. The rule really does need to be just day to day kind of living, being with one another, sharing that space, and creating times to be able to just be in that space together.
Yeah. You mentioned music too, and I think that's a really great way that we can bond with our teens. Is the teens that I work with all the time are playing me music, and I'm like, wow, that's deep. We got some stuff going on underneath there. We don't always talk about the deep stuff that's going on underneath, but it's just kind of a picture into what's going on in their world right now. And so as much as parents can tolerate the music that their teens are listening to, being able to listen to music with them, I think is a really great way to connect and learn a little bit more about what's going on without having explicit conversation about what's going on.
Right. So there's this phrase that I've used over the years of joining. Yeah. And I feel like that's kind of a theme in some of what you're talking about here, is that there are times when we're going to be invitational, and we're going to have them tag along with us or come and do something and come alongside us. But we also need to balance that out with joining, which is things that they're doing, things that they're interested in, and like participating along with them in that. And a lot of times that can be digital stuff, like videos, or gaming is another one. And I've talked about that on the podcast in previous episodes too. And I enjoy doing that with all of my kids, but yeah, those are things that they're interested in. And music inevitably at some point in our adolescent development for all of us has been like an expressive medium for us, right? Yeah, that we can connect with. So maybe we're sharing some of our favorite music, but that's, again, being invitational, trying to get them into our world. I think it's also really important for us to get into their world and kind of rub shoulders with them with whatever they're interested in. Yeah. What are your thoughts about when kids are participating in activities outside of the home, whether it's athletics or music or other just other activities? What kind of guidance would you give to parents in terms of their level of involvement or participation or like attendance of things? Like I think, some parents maybe have the belief that they need to be there for everything, like all the time. I'm not going to miss a game, or I'm not going to miss a thing. And then maybe there are other times where it's like, it's just an impossibility. Like I can't make that. And then typically there's some guilt that comes along with that. Like, I want to be there, but I can't, So I don't know. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah. I think one, having conversations with our teens about what that looks like for us. So I'm not coming to your basketball game, not because you didn't score any points last time, but because I have this work thing and I wish I could be there, right? So having those conversations beforehand about kind of like expectations for what the season or what the performance is or whatever the activity looks like. And then, making decisions about what works for you, maybe your teen doesn't even care whether you're there or not. I know some teens they say they could care less if their parents are showing up or not.
I don't always believe that.
Yeah, they probably do like knowing that their people are showing up for them and being there. But there doesn't have to be the guilt too. I think that we can model healthy boundaries again for our teens in the way that we make decisions and the way that we schedule things for our teens. I wonder like what it communicates to our teens if we're at basketball games 4 nights a week, right, for a teen or something like that. That we're always there, what that says about us and the way that we're living our adult lives. And I think it can communicate to teens like, I love you and I care about you. But I don't know if it's a realistic look at, like a healthy adult life either, to be 100% immersed in the high school basketball team. Do you know what I'm saying there?
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I do. I think there's a balance here somewhere. Right. Of being able to communicate, care and support and interest. Right. And sometimes in order to do that, you do it best just by showing up.
Right.
And other times when you can't, you can communicate that it's still important.
Yeah.
And I have this other thing. Right. And that doesn't take away or diminish my support and care for you.
Right.
But I think teens will get that. But as parents, we need to like recognize that too. Like, so that we're either one, not overly guilting ourselves. Right. Because it's like, I can't be there. And I quote unquote should, or the only way that I can communicate my support is by being there all the time. Right. Like, nope, that's not the case either. Right. So anytime we fall into those extremes, I think we're kind of setting ourselves up, and we need to have a more moderated perspective on it.
That is a good rule when we're using those all or nothings.
Yeah, right. I'm thinking about some other connection points. So, as we were kind of talking about kids engaged in activities, and then there are things within the home. What about within our faith community? Because that's another aspect of life that, again, at times has been diminished or restricted during the pandemic. Again, things are opening up and there's more things available, but we're not accustomed to doing that.
I know.
Right? But kind of trying to support that reintegration into our faith community and participating in that part of life. Again, that's another developmental thing for kids too, just thinking about, faith and religion and what does it mean to, that I'm a member at this church and all of these kind of things. And now, that's been a little more complicated, over the last year.
Right, because we've had the opportunity to not engage or to semi-engage in...
or it's really engage at our own level or at our own time,
Yes.
Because everything is so available online.
Right.
It's like, I don't have to get up and go to church at that time. I can watch it whenever. Yeah. It's just that sometimes I'm sure the whenever doesn't happen. Yep.
Yeah, and a lot of these parents that I work with, or the teens that I work with, and the parents who are asking the questions, we're having these conversations about like, I used to go to church, and now I never go to church, and mom and dad are going again, but I just kind of fell off the bandwagon, I guess, with the COVID, and I had the opportunity to sleep in on Sunday. So I think with teens, and I think about faith, the first thing that I typically recommend is engaging in a youth group or some sort of activity that we're going to get some of that law and gospel incorporated, but then we're also going to have fun while we're there. And I know that's not a parent-teen thing that we're typically going to youth group with our kids, but if we can get them kind of in the doors, that's helpful.
Yeah, that's going to be something that we want to support, or even maybe advocate for, say, oh, here's an opportunity. They're usually time limited, so it's like it's only an hour and a half or something,
Right. Do you want to invite a friend, things like that?
Oh,
those
yeah,
can be great ways
absolutely.
to kind of increase that buy-in. Or we're going to stop at Culver's on the way home and get the ice cream. Those are, yes, whatever.
There's that food again.
Yes, I'm a food-motivated person. Can you tell? But anyways, then having those conversations too about what does going to church as a family look like for us right now. Parents, they want to be back in church in person, right? Or we're going 2 Sundays a month, or teen, maybe you're coming with us 2 Sundays a month, or we'd like you to come with us 2 Sundays a month, and then 2 Sundays a month we can watch from home at noon on Sunday in our pajamas.
Sure.
And we're going to join you in that too. So making some of those decisions, especially as our teens are older, 15, 16, 17 years old, can they have some say? And we're going to kind of set that structure and that expectation of our family member or our family goes to church together, right? But maybe teen gets to have
this isn't us thing, a we thing.
Yeah. But maybe teen can have some say in what that looks like on a week-to-week basis or monthly basis.
Yeah. And then, like you said, I think that's spot on. I know some of the best experiences that I had, like associated with church growing up, were activity-based, whether that was a lock-in or, a camping trip or, whatever, like youth convention or rally or something like that. Like those are the ones that are kind of like ingrained in my head. And so as we're able to do those things, like, those are good. We want to encourage that. That's a good opportunity. And again, I guess if there's some reluctance or resistance to that, it's trying to meet them where they're at and let them have a say in how some of this happens. So, okay, if not this, then what else could we do? It's not, the option isn't either no church or all church, right? There's got to be some input on that level of engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. As we were talking about enjoying teen activities at church and how that was formative for you and your relationship with your church community, I'm thinking about parents and engaging or re-engaging in those activities too. So if we have the opportunity to go to Bible study or cook the Lenten dinner or whatever it is where the adults are engaging too, that's an opportunity for us to model to our teens that this is a safe thing and this is a thing that's positive for me, to have social connections and social connections with people who have the same beliefs that we do. Those are important things to have in life.
Yeah. And then, so again, that's outside of the home, and then of course that can be translated back into the home in terms of some of these connection strategies that, that we're still praying together as a family, or that we're still accessing God's word through a reading of a passage or a devotion or, something that, again, is a connecting point. And maybe that's piggybacked onto something like a dinner, right? Yeah. Or, we're listening to a devotional as we're folding laundry or something, like those can just kind of be seamlessly kind of incorporated into the flow. But it takes, again, purposeful planning and decision-making on the parent's part. And just, again, exposing your teen to that can create another connection point of like talking about what was said or so about important. What we're reading, right?
Yeah. I know we're on a podcast right now too, but I think podcasts can be such a friendly way to have some of these conversations right now too, because you're getting all these new ideas, and then you want to talk about it, right? When it's over. And so I'm just thinking about incorporating faith and spiritual practices into your home. If you haven't been doing that recently, it probably seems really intimidating. And we can have some more kind of natural strategies into like, I am now playing Christian music on Alexa, and then we're playing a podcast, and then we're reading the Bible passage that they were talking about within the podcast. We can kind of get creative with what that looks like. Yeah.
I think sometimes we kind of get locked in that, like a family devotional time looks a certain way, or, and maybe that's, and maybe that's a great fit for a lot of families, but I also recognize that if you haven't been doing that, that's kind of a hard thing to just like jump into.
Yes,
so
everyone at 7:00, we're sitting on the couch and we're yeah.
So being able to have some ways again of like incorporating or piggybacking off of, I love that, and I like the kind of the progression that you laid out there. Starting with Alexa playing some Casting Crowns or something,
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. This has been just awesome, Katelyn. So we've covered a ton of ground, and I know there's more things that we could be talking about today. So maybe that just means we're going to have to get together again down the road
sometime,
for sure. But I guess I'm wondering if there are any resources specifically for teens or for parents that are kind of your go-tos, or things that, like, whether it's mental health or pandemic related, I don't know, just some of your go-tos that you would want to share with our listeners.
Yeah, so some of these strategies that we've been talking today, we've been talking a lot about connection. And I think of the Karen Purvis Institute. Are you familiar with Karen Purvis? Okay, she was a psychologist who was really about developing connected relationships with our teens and kids, specifically kids and teens from really, tough, traumatic places. But also, I think these strategies can be used with really any kids too. So really focused on, connecting with your teen and being able to meet them where they're at prior to providing that discipline and the structure. So like we're always leading with the love, and then we're following up with that, the structure, whatever that needs to be. So I can't remember her website right now.
That's okay. I'll link it in the show notes.
Beautiful.
That'll
Good. I was going to ask if she'd do that. And she does a training too called the Empowered to Connect training that's been really helpful to some of the families that I've worked with. And then when I think about teen resources, something that I often leave my teens with when they're leaving a counseling session, I know they've kind of had a tough day and they want to connect. There is a free platform called Teen Line. It's just teenline.com. And that is a platform where teens can text. I think they can video chat now. Or message back and forth with other teens who have been really well trained on kind of navigating difficult situations. And then there's always a trained professional there on site too at this, the platform. I guess maybe they're all remote right now, but there's always a trained professional accessible to those teens too that are providing that additional support, so that in crisis situations they can be that support that's needed to the teen. But that's a really great way for teens to connect and like feel like they're not alone and know that there's hope. Yes.
And is that only a crisis situation, or is that really just
I just broke up with my boyfriend and I'm feeling it's more like a difficult situation type situation type site, I guess. But that's something that I like to give to teens when I know that they have something that they want to talk about or they might need to talk about and they don't know who or where they can talk about it with in person.
Sure. Cool. I will link those in the show notes. And a couple of the other things that you and I referenced during our conversation today will be there as well. So our audience can't see you, Katelyn, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about what's coming for you on the horizon.
Yes, audience, I'm very pregnant right now. So I have a baby that's coming. Our third is due in a couple weeks here.
That's so exciting.
I'm so excited. I do remember this from my last maternity leave. We knew each other. There's nothing like a newborn baby and snuggles and taking some time to kind of reset and refocus on a growing family. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then, yes, I've already thought about all my dreams after for our day treatment and working with those teens when I do come back from maternity leave. But my next thing is just a phase of rest, if you can have rest. With a
be a mom.
To be a mom, be a
mom in a really full-time way, like just 100% of your focus. That's I've appreciated the moments in life where I've been able to just like kind of pause on everything and say, I am only dad right now. Like those are just really fun, special moments. So pray that everything goes well for you.
Thank
I'm
you.
sure it will. It's just,
Yeah.
I'm excited for you and for Ryan. I think it's just, awesome.
Yes. Just talking about it, I'm like, come tomorrow, but don't.
You've got stuff to do still.
A couple more weeks, but it'll be a good phase of life. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right, Katelyn, it's been great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A big thank you to Katelyn for joining the WellMind community, and thank you for spending your time with me today. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe through your podcast app so that you automatically get the latest episode. New episodes are released every first and third Monday of the month. Also, consider taking a moment to review the show if you found our discussion meaningful to you. Word of mouth is great too. Please let people know about the WellMind community and spread the word. Check out the links in the show notes to find the resources mentioned during our discussion today. Many thanks to the staff here in the Bethany Lutheran College podcast studio. They are tremendous in providing technical support for the podcast. And special thanks to Lauren McMacken for designing the logo and cover art for the WellMind. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, be well.